to share, so I'm going to share the screen.
And I'm recording now, just in case we want to, you've got control of the screen.
Okay, and you're recording, are you, Barry?
I am, just in case you want to delete it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right. So I've been asked to give a bit of a talk about the journey, which is the mural that's in its the main lodge, and if I can move, oh, hang on, a bit of technical issue. There we go. So if you can have a look at that, this was my brief. So have a think yourself. What would you do if the person closest to God in Victoria came to you and said that he wanted something that paid homage to the rich traditions of Freemasonry whilst looking to the future? And and that was my entire brief. And I started to ask him, well, what do you have in mind, Keith? And he said, nothing. It's just totally up to you. But it has to be impressive, and it has to, has to really show where Freemasonry is going. So I don't know if you gentlemen would react the same as me, but panic was what hit me. Absolute panic, because the brief was just so open. So what I'd like to chat to you now about is just very briefly what the journey actually is, and to give a starting point for you to start to access it, because there's three layers of meaning. There's sacred geometry, there's a narrative and symbolism layered over the top of that, and over the top of that again, there's augmented reality. So in its simplest form, the journey is a great big oil painting with augmented reality put on it. As I said, it's at 288 Victoria Parade. It's about 6 metres by 1.5 metres in size, and it's just one big piece of linen that's been stretched. Now, one of the reasons for going to oil paint was that it's a very traditional medium. And what we were looking for was a mural that paid homage to the past and spoke about fraternity and things today, but also had an eye to the future. So going back to a Florentine classical oil painting on linen, I thought was a really nice way of doing that. The present was symbolized by using an abstract style rather than a realism. And then on top of that, there's the augmented reality, which is really symbolic of the view to the future. It was the most high-tech, futuristic thing I could stick on the painting. And that is invisible without a smartphone. I don't know if any of you have had much to do with augmented reality, but it's impacting, oh, you would, Barry. It's impacting art in a major way. So the journey really then is a modern allegory containing hidden meanings that I would like each individual viewer to try and interpret. There's layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of symbolism for you to explore. So we'll just touch on a few of them just to kick you off. The base or the foundation of the whole piece is in sacred geometry. Now, all of the work that I do is very heavily based on sacred geometry as a scaffold, which I build it on. So normally I wouldn't even mention it, to be honest with you. Because what it does is it gives a harmony and a peace and a unity to the whole piece, which is, that's the strength of that skeleton. But for Freemasons, sacred geometry has a much more, much deeper implications. So we'll just touch on a few. So sacred geometry, for those who, just to jog your memory through the alcoholic haze, is embedded mystical mathematical relationships, ratios and numerical symbolism. So the journey is built on quite a few overlaying structures. The main one is the divine proportion, or the golden mean, and that's 1 to 1.618. Overlaid over that is the double square. There's also the Pythagorean triple, 3, 4, 5, which everybody would be quite familiar with. And there's also the 3, 5, 7, the steps in the Solomon's Temple, which I couldn't resist using that, because you don't get an opportunity to use 3, 5, 7 very often. So with a divine proportion, it's 1 unit high, 1.618 units wide, and that's the perfect rectangle. It's supposed to be the most beautiful rectangle, or most beautiful subdivision of a line. So it's found in nature. A handsome man, say like Rob Barnes, when you actually subdivided his face up, because he's so stunningly handsome, you would find that pretty much all of the subdivisions in his face were very, very close to the divine proportion. So humans naturally pick that up. A lot of the major buildings, you know, the Parthenon and those sorts of buildings, where the ancient buildings where you walk into them and you have this feeling of elation and awe at the size of them, but also you have a feeling that you belong in that space, which sort of feels like a little bit of an oxymoron sometimes. The way the ancients did it is by using the divine proportion. It's one of my beefs about modern architecture is that they've drifted away from that. So often in modern architecture, you'll go into a very large space that has the wow factor, but you don't feel like you belong. There's no human connection to it. So the proportions of the journey, on saying that, are 1 to 3.326. Anybody got any ideas what that could be?
The doubling of the length?
Yeah, way to go. If I had some jelly teddy bears, you would get it, Matt.
He's a financial guru. He knows all about numbers.
Well, this is my limit. So yes, exactly. So it's 2 divine rectangles put end on end. So then what we can do with that, so there we have a shape which is one of the most beautiful shapes straight away.
It's also the Hollywood factor, where all the beautiful women in Hollywood fit that relationship. The proportion between their eyes and the height of their nose, it fits the divine horizontally.
Yes, definitely. And Tom Cruise is the same. Sort of all of those, you know, sort of the beautiful people, when you actually get their face down and analyse them. The human figure is the same.
It's like me, Richard.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of you, Rob, when I said that.
Great to see Rob again. You've made my night, Rob.
So then just sort of bopping along for us. So then taking that initial shape, then subdividing it horizontally to the divine proportion. We get a subdivision there, and we get a second subdivision there. Then we can divide it vertically. We get a subdivision there and a subdivision there. So that gives us a grid or a foundation which mathematically harmonizes all of the main subdivisions in the piece right from the get-go. An artist that did this a lot was Da Vinci. It's one of the reasons that Da Vinci's work just looks so divine. It's all the divine proportion. I thought that was a good place to start for Freemasons. All of those other ratios that I mentioned are all in the journey. So I'll leave you to discover where they are, and it's used in all different ways. The next is the more obvious, is the narrative and the symbolism that you see when you have a look at the piece. And when you walk into Freemasons Victoria through the front door and you turn left in the foyer and you move towards the stairs, you can see the mural virtually straight away. Actually, and what you're essentially doing physically is moving from the outside, which is a state of darkness, through the building into a state of light, and you're starting to walk up those stairs where the work is done and where the light is happening. So you're approaching the painting from the right-hand side, which is quite unusual, actually. Just as a little bit of trivia, my artistic journey started when I was about 17, and I met a gentleman called Robert Gill, who I ended up, he was an architect, author, all sorts of things. And I worked in his studio for about 7 years. And so my artistic training was with that mentor, and more of a Renaissance training. I stayed right out of the modern academies and galleries and things, gallery schools, until much later. As it happens, totally by coincidence, Bob Gill died about 4 years ago. Totally by coincidence, that column Bob Gill designed and had made. So I've done a complete circuit now to have a painting as a backdrop to my mentor. It's a bit of trivia. So with the painting, because you're approaching it from the right, this painting is designed to be read from right to left, not the usual left to right. So what that gives us is, metaphorically, the right-hand side of the painting is the west, the left-hand side of the painting is the east. And you have a movement across it from right to left, of darkness to light, material to spiritual, uninitiated to enlightened, and quite a lot of other sort of themes running across. And you'll sort of see, just as we're looking at it, that the right-hand side is quite heavy and solid, and all of the edges are quite sharp. As you move across, it becomes softer and softer and softer and more ethereal as you move to the left-hand side of the picture. So the painting is a journey, and it depicts the journey of every individual's life, but also every individual's Masonic journey. And in a lot of ways, it also depicts the journey of Freemasonry itself. Remember those two key subdivisions that I mentioned? Well, they drop through there, and you can see how some of the major areas have been picked up. But what they do is they actually divide the painting into three. The right-hand side is the past, which is a Mason's life prior to finding Freemasonry. The middle section is the present, which is the work being undertaken right now. And the left-hand side is the future. So metaphorically, as you enter the foyer and you first move towards the painting, you're at the foot of the stairs. You're standing with those three gentlemen in darkness in the past, looking at the painting.
Can I ask who those three gentlemen are, or is it too obvious?
Excellent that you asked that, Barry. The check will be in the mail. What a great segue. Let's have a look at the past section, shall we? So we zero in on the past. We end up with three gentlemen who were fairly obvious, but I thought I would mention them. So remember, we're standing in the foyer. We're standing alongside of King Solomon, Hiram, King of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff. And we're sort of looking along the painting from where we're standing. And we're all looking at, as you look along the painting, you're looking at the Masonic journey through to the light on the other side of the painting.
And you said you were in a panic, Richard. I must panic more often.
It's cool fun. So then coming from, and I'm just picking up a few of the symbols. So as I say, we'll be here forever if I try and pick it all up. But coming from the three founders, we've got life force energies, and that's symbolic of them breathing life into Freemasonry. And indeed, as I said, you know, the three of them are looking at the future of Freemasonry. And those energy life forces, souls, spirits, whatever you want to call them, also double up as the essences of each individual Mason. And you'll note, if you have a look there, how sharp everything is and how realist the style is at that stage. The stone wall is a representation of a symbol of materialism and functional Freemasonry. It harks back to the tessellated pavement and everything around that. And in a artistic sense, what it does is it limits the space. So you can see there, that wall is really close to us. So when we're pre-Freemasons, I suppose, in the past, before we start our journey properly. We're youthful, all that sort of thing. Our world is actually quite restrained and quite small, even though we don't realize it. There's the ashlar, of course. Another thing I'd like to point out is that there's three life force essences starting to move towards the ashlar. So out of everything that's happening, all of the other life forces, there's these three that are heading towards the ashlar, which is symbolic of those three people realizing that they're uncut stones and they need to improve themselves. Move through to the present, the middle section. We're looking at the middle section. First thing we can, or not the first thing, but the square and compasses represent the craft. Then if you recall, there was those three essences coming into the ashlar. Out of the ashlar come 5 essences. And then once those 5 essences move through the craft, they come out as 7. So there we've got the 3, 5 and 7 of King Solomon's temple. What's also happening with the essences is that the 3 and the 5 are quite clearly drawn and they're separate. They're individual, especially the first 3. They're on their own. As you move across the painting, those essences become more ethereal, they start to glow, and they make connection, which is symbolizing fraternity and community that you get through Freemasonry as you develop. Some of the essences move up through the past master's jewel, which is symbolizing achievement, advancement, and increased learning. Not all of them. Some of them sort of skip straight through and go off in other directions. We all have our own path in Freemasonry, is what I'm trying to say there. We've got the ladder, which is and all the symbols around that, going from at the bottom, it's in the west in the darkness, and the top of the ladder is at the top in the east. But our ladder isn't straight and rigid, because it's symbolizing our ascension through us ascending through our lives and learning and achieving. But life's not a straight line. Life's wobbly, so that's why this ladder is wobbly, and it's really dodgy in places. It's really thin. There's often times when we just really are very uncertain of our life's choices. The rungs on the ladder, 3, 5 and 7. For those of you who might be Matt, if you're into numbers, it's quite interesting when you look at the history of the ladder in Freemasonry, and at different times they've used different numbered rungs. So I'm trying to be controversial there. So I'll just leave that with you for those of you who are interested in that sort of thing. The mason working on the keystone is representing the Order of the Mark, and the flowing veils representing the Royal Arch chapter. So really the craft, the Order of the Mark and the Royal Arch chapter, here I'm using them as symbols of all of the orders and rites that we have, and you can move on to. I couldn't sort of fit them all on. So I thought that was a nice way of moving. Because from what I can see, people tend to move through those 3 first and then onto other areas. Right up the top, we've got the blazing star and the all-seeing eye, and that's dead center in the painting. And the all-seeing eye looking over everything that's happening, past, present, and future. I'll have a quick look at the future. By the time we get here, you can see what I mean about it being ethereal. Everything now is soft and moving. There isn't the essences have blended into a tunnel, which sort of move up towards Solomon's temple. Sprig of acacia tucked really small in the painting. You know, this thing's 6 meters long. The sprig of acacia would be about that big, intentionally. So that's the moral life, rebirth, and immortality. And just in from that top right-hand corner, we've got the white light, hinting that the journey might continue. So it's a quick run through some of the narrative and symbolism. We get to the augmented reality bit. which does people's head in, mine as well. So with the augmented reality, what happens is that the painting actually comes off the wall, flows into the foyer, then it flows right up the staircase, and about the landing, it cascades over the right-hand side of the handrail and back into the painting. So it becomes a circuit that goes right around. It's another path that you can follow in your journey. So with the AR, what's important to know is you have to have a smartphone. And so you go to the App Store, you download an app, or you can go to my website. I've got a little Freemasons button there that you can push and it'll help you find the app. And you download my app, which is Payne's 4D Art, which I've donated the use of. Biggie that I have to mention to everybody is make sure it's a late model smartphone, not a museum phone. If you take your phone out and there's a dial with numbers on it, probably won't work. Okay, just floating it past you. You'll need access to the internet. And the number one query that I get, because I've done quite a few public exhibitions now of AR sculptures and things, the number one problem that everybody has is they've got their camera turned off. So this thing works through the camera in your phone, so make sure it's on. So an important thing to realize with the augmented reality, the AR, is that it's not just affectation stuck on the front to look wow bang. What it does is the augmented reality is keyed into the painting and it gives us an invisible layer, an invisible metaphysical layer of narrative to the painting, which is only accessible to people with the mobile phone and Masonic knowledge. So what that symbolizes is that through knowledge, you can see more than what's just in front of you. So just as an example of that, if you look at the sword down just off Keith's left shoulder, the sword is floating in augmented reality. So it's about 1 meter in front of the painting, but it's floating in between the ashlar and the square and compasses, symbolizing the craft. So that's the inner guard. I'll leave the rest of the symbols for you to find. Really cool thing about the augmented reality is like this, you can take pictures of your mates in augmented reality. And I've heard from some of the people in at the building that they had a function apparently just before everything got all locked down. And I think it was Alex or what, I've forgotten who actually told me. But the biggest problem they had at the function was that all of the women were out here taking photographs of each other, holding the sword and some of the other things. So I'm trying to get the women back into the room, which of course was one of the reasons that we wanted the painting to have that modern bent. We want to spark people's imagination and show them Freemasonry is not old-fashioned. It is keeping up with the times. It's new, it's modern, and it will keep up with society. So it was exactly what we wanted to happen, because it makes people ask questions as well. Even the young installer that helped me install the painting, he must have been about 35, had a horrible impression of Freemasonry. By the time he'd been through all this process, he was thinking about joining. So in summary, the journey is symbolically charged. There's layers of meaning that are all interlocked. And you need your Masonic knowledge as a key to reading it. So it's also a little bit of a prompt. If there's something in the painting that somebody doesn't understand, it's sort of a bit of a cattle prod for them to pick up a book or start to ask some learned people like Les and Barry, what's that all about? And that the AR adds to the narrative. So all in all, just in summary, the journey, it's a journey, just like Freemasonry is.
Wow.
Brilliant stuff, Richard.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
Has anyone actually said anything to you, Richard, about writing a booklet